certified project manager with professional experience in multiple sectors. He has led transformation projects and various successful cross-functional project teams in diverse industries with a solid understanding of the operations. Dr. Thompson is a parent, community representative on our York Catholic District School Board Anti-Black Racism Pillar Committee, and we really appreciate the experience and expertise that he brings to that table and that he will be sharing with us this evening. So thank you so much, Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, for being with us this evening. We really look forward to hearing your story and your wisdom and learning from it so that we can do better.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Really appreciate it. Well done. All right, I will start presenting now. So, and here we go. So let me know when you can see my screen. I will put my slide in slideshow.
We can see it.
Okay, there we go. So, all right. So first of all, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I mean, the weather is so nice outside. I'm glad you decided to join us and spend some time. I understand from Mike that I have an hour and 15 minutes. I'll try to use less time to actually do the presentation. And then hopefully we'll have some good discussion afterwards. And also want to thank basically York Catholic's District School Board for hosting these events, and Mike Skinner specifically for inviting me to participate. So I want to start with the land acknowledgement, and you're pretty much familiar with it, that we are all gathered on the ancestral lands and waters of all indigenous peoples who have left their footprints on Mother Earth before us. We respectfully acknowledge those who have walked on it, those who walk on it now, and the future generation who have yet to walk upon it. We pray to the Creator for strength and wisdom, that all may continue to serve as stewards of the earth. And then I also wanted to share an ancestral acknowledgement. We observe a moment's silence to honor those who have led lives of service, those who have stood up for social and economic justice, those who have sacrificed so that we may be here, those who have confronted and dismantled oppressive practices and institutions, and have built affirming and equitable examples to inspire us all. You who stood against economic exploitation, anti-Black racism, and all forms of racism, gender discrimination, religious bigotry, and other oppressive forces. Those who resisted and were left in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. We consciously stand on your sturdy and courageous shoulders. We thank you, we honor you, we observe a moment of silence. All right, so in terms of the agenda, this is what we are going to be going through tonight, a call to action. I'm going to also share the reasons why I feel blessed. Talk a little bit about my life in Jamaica, the move to Canada, discovering systemic racism, where it started from in my mind and what continues to perpetuate it. Share the views from our Pope, share resources from our faith, and suggest things that we can do to be better. Share my prayer for the future, and then at the end, go into some Q&As. So I always like this expression. Some of you are probably familiar with it. It's from Dr. Stephen Covey, the late Dr. Stephen Covey, where he says, we should always begin with the end in mind. And some of the areas that I'd like us to think about throughout the presentation in terms of a call to action is that representation matters, that we should let our Catholic faith be a tuning fork, especially from the point of view of pro-life views, that we should research and educate ourselves, identify allies, co-conspirators, mentors, and sponsors, Seek organizations that inspire and support you. Take action based on your circle of influence. Gain mental health support if required. And I look at it from the point of view of think of dentists or your visit to the dentist. You want to start small instead of waiting until it gets into a big ache. And then also maintain your health. So just be healthy in general. So as I go into my presentation, I want to start from a sense of gratitude and a feeling that, I feel blessed for what I consider to be the 4 major miracles of my life. I'm grateful for my parents, for the wonderful family that they formed, that I was a part of. I'm grateful to witness the birth of my son 20 years plus ago. I'm grateful that my wife survived childbirth because she could have died the day after. And I'm also grateful for my Christmas baby, my daughter. So in terms of where I'm from, I started life in Jamaica in the Caribbean. So many of you know where Jamaica is, just below Cuba in the Caribbean Sea. I'm sure a few of you here would have said that you've been to Jamaica, benefited from our all-inclusive and the atmosphere that we have in Jamaica. In terms of my education, I went to high school at St. George's College, which is a Jesuit Catholic institution. And actually, that's where I converted to becoming Catholic while I was at high school. I also nurtured my spirituality through attending Stella Maris Church, where I was altar server and active youth volunteer at the church. Then I left Jamaica for a few years to go to St. Augustine in Trinidad to study engineering. Came back and worked at the brewery in the island called, well, it was Dennis and Geddes at the time, now called Red Stripe Brewery. Became a professional engineer in Jamaica, and then started my career. Well, I started as an accidental project manager, but became a certified project manager before moving to Canada. So in Canada, I've been part of multiple communities. First joined the parish, St. Mary Immaculate Church. So I've been at that parish for 20 plus years. Both my children went to York Catholic District School Board. And, what I found interesting, I became more actively involved because I wanted to be close to my children. And just from the sense that when my daughter was 4, she could discern that because of this color of her skin, she was treated differently. And when she was about grade 8, she was bullied by her classmates. So because of that, I felt I needed to be actively involved to make sure that I was understanding what was happening at school so that I could be there for my children as they needed them, and served on the parent council at St. Teresa Lisieux. I also joined the Federation of North American Explorers, and some of you may know that scouting organization is very strong in the Catholic faith. So I used that as an organization that shared my Catholic values, and I wanted my children to have that experience. I also volunteered with the soccer club because I wanted my children to have that healthy experience, and continue to volunteer in other places like the PMI Toronto, where I'm now president, and also wanted to continue to support my church as one of members of Knights of Columbus. So, and as you know, I'm now a member of the York Regional Alliance African Canadian Communities, where we do support the York Catholic District School Board with anti-racism, anti-Black racism pillar, and other areas of support for the Black community. And then also spent some time working with Black Professional in Technology Network, COFPE, which is a financial institution supporting Black professionals. And then recently, the Black North Initiative, which derived from or came out of what was happening in the US with the death of George Floyd. We felt that there was a need to do more and to get companies to take a little bit more ownership of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I spoke about 2 countries, and I just want to reconcile a little bit of just the comparison and the change in, moving from Jamaica to Canada. Jamaica has a population of about 3 million people. And, basically it's 90% Black, but our motto is out of many one people. In terms of faith, Jamaica is 75% Christian, but only 3% Catholic. So Black history, Black national heroes, so very strong, Black country. In Canada, Canada is more than 10 times the size of Jamaica, about 38 million people. Black race here is in the minority, about 3.5%. Strong in the Catholic faith, about 40% of the 67% who are Christians consider themselves Catholic. So it's interesting that as I move from Jamaica to Canada, there's a difference in the complexity or the composition of the country. And this is where I see organizations like YRAC, ANCA, MACA, NACA, and Parents of Black Children in the York region are important, because we need to make sure that the voices of the Black community are heard. And I'll explain a little bit more as I go on. So the next thing I wanted to share is just the whole thing of intersectionality. And I wanted to share this as important, and it may sound a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, because we use this tool, and some of you may have seen it before, to understand how discrimination impact different people who are not white. Canada, as you know, is majority white, and that causes people to have a certain view of the world. And unfortunately, in society, if you are of a different ethnicity, different gender, different age, or, so if I were to use the numbers to explain it better, if we say that older white men are given a number of 100%, then as you add elements of intersectionality, such as ethnicity, it's almost like you tax the individual. So if an older white man will get $1 in terms of pay, then which is 100% of it, then if you introduce ethnicity, you're introducing somewhat of a taxation, maybe 10, 15%, whatever it is. And then when you introduce gender on top of that, people usually feel that there's additional taxation being put in, where they're even getting less of the 100%. Now, the term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, just to recognize that certain individuals face multiplicity and intersecting forms of structural racism. So this is why I wanted to share this with you, just to help you to understand, things like the term of Black taxation, whereas Black people, we feel that we are treated differently, and we end up having to do a little bit more to get the same level of respect that we believe that we deserve. So where is it coming from? So wanted to talk about the roots of it, and I'm just going to stop sharing and just flip over to a video that hopefully will do justice to my explanation here. Is everybody seeing the screen?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So I want to play this video, which is basically showing an animation of the 15,000 or so slave ships. So each time you see a dot going across the screen, think of it that's basically a slave ship going across the screen with hundreds of slaves on it. Now, when you think of it from a pro-life point of view, for each 100 or a few hundred slaves that are in those ships, the raiders would have gone inland to villages to get these slaves. And they would have looked at a certain section of that village. Any child probably below a certain age, babies and toddlers, they probably realized that those individuals could not survive the journey that they needed to make from the village to the ports on the slave ships to travel for a month to 6 months on a voyage over to the Americas. So those individuals that were either too young, too old, too infirm, too sick, were probably killed or left for dead as they took the able-bodied slaves and presented them to the ports to load these ships. So that's the kind of context that I'm encouraging you to look at this picture at. Thousands of ships. It is estimated that 12 million slaves went across. 2 million didn't make it. 2 million ended up at the bottom of the ocean. And of course, millions also died because they weren't able-bodied enough to make that journey based on the views of the raiders. So that's the pro-life lens I want to share. And I'm going to share another video here.
I've always been intrigued by the Atlantic slave trade. There are very few stories about what happened to the people on their way over and what happened to the people who didn't survive. We thought it was worth telling that story. We think, from our estimation,
12 million Africans were trafficked. More than 2 million died en route.
buried at sea somewhere.
We're actually looking at the site of one of the greatest crimes in history.
This is currency created to buy a human being.
The ocean holds stories that haven't been told.
Finding something down there, it's gonna pop the lid off this story.
This is ground zero for the whole transatlantic slave trade.
It's almost the capital of it. My ancestry started in Gabon from the Benga tribe.
The story of the slave trade is world history. The world bears responsibility for it. You have to come to terms with it. You have to confront it.
So I wanted to share that to give you a little bit more context on, like I said, what I believe is, where slavery came from in terms of, the root of it. And just ask you just to think about it again from the point of view of just that pro-life lens, the number of lives that were lost. As you can see, most of the slaves ended up in South America, where our Pope is from, which to my mind explains some of his understanding, his empathy, and his stance against racism, which we'll talk about shortly. And then the next large group went to the Caribbean, where I'm from. And when I look at this, I think of the fact that I'm alive today means that my ancestors are survivors. They survived the raiding, they survived the journey, the voyage, and survived long enough to end up in Jamaica. So let's now switch to think about racism in Canada, where it may have come from in terms of the systemic racism and how it relates to systemic racism. So it's estimated that between the period of 1671 and 1834, there were about 4,200 slaves. Now, there's many people say that slavery everybody knows that slavery ended at 1834 across the Commonwealth, the British Empire. Although some will say that Canada abolished slavery before in 1825 in the legislature in Prince Edward Island. And in terms of Black immigration to Canada, most of the Black community, the Black migrants that came to Canada, were fleeing slavery in the US to come to Canada from the period 1763 to 1865. That was until 1967, where Pierre Trudeau changed the immigration policy. And the change that he made in the policy was that immigrants were assessed in terms of education, skill, and employment prospects, as opposed to being screened out based on race, ethnicity, or nationality. Because before that time in 1967, if you're white, you could get into Canada. If you're non-white, you won't be allowed in. So that's a critical phase. And in fact, I had to be assessed before I got my immigration papers to come to Canada. So then, slavery ended, immigration policy changed, but it wasn't until 1977 when there was a Human Rights Act that ended segregated schools. So schools were segregated. So even though slavery ended, etc., there wasn't an integration of the population in schools. And in fact, the last segregated school didn't close until 1983. So you can see that racism kind of evolves. So it's less than it was before. There's not, slavery where people are being whipped, etc. But then it becomes a little bit more subtle. And in fact, in 2017, there's a York University report that comes out that speaks about the critical understanding of experience and outcomes of Black students. Because in that report, they're saying Black students are twice as likely to be enrolled in applied classes as opposed to academic. So that whole concept of streaming, that didn't end until 1999. So then in that same report, it was, and you probably know all this already, is that, Black students were twice as likely to be suspended from high school for the same crime as other students. And it wasn't until 2007 that zero tolerance policy ended. But part of what's in the mind of us as Black parents and Black students as well is that, as Thomas Jefferson has quoted as saying, the price for freedom is eternal vigilance. We still feel that there's this need to be hyper vigilant because we're never too sure if society really accepts us. And in fact, last year, a biracial family experienced some taunting by teenagers with a noose. So imagine you're taking your family to enjoy a picnic on a beach, and teenagers drive up brandishing a noose, threatening you. It's not not a very comfortable feeling. And then in fact, we see that with COVID, we're realizing some of the deplorable conditions that migrant workers are still experiencing. So it almost leads to believe that the migrant workers are almost like the form of the new slaves. They're coming up from the Caribbean and Mexico to work on farms, but the conditions that they live in, their bunks, are not necessarily of the standard that we would want any visitor to experience. So something that we need to be conscious of, need to be aware of as we continue to look to improve our society. So, yeah, so those are sort of qualitative views in a sense of racism. And 5 years ago, I decided to look at it from more of a quantitative point of view when I did my thesis investigating the relationship between racial diversity and Canadian company performance. And one of the things that struck me was the fact that when I looked at the composition of the senior leadership on boards and executive members, as you can see, the intersectionality comes up again, where the majority of the people or individuals on boards and in executive leadership represent majority white older men. And as you can see, that they're represented in orange. The blue represents white women. The lighter shade of orange are visible minority men, and then that sliver that you see in gray are the visible minority women. So intersectionality seeming to come in and be reflected here. Did I hear a question come up? Okay, I'll continue. And then as I did my research, I found that what was interesting is that there is some protections in place in law in Canada to protect people that are of different ethnicity. So in terms of the Employment Equity Act, there's protection in that would support equity. So there are 4 groups that are called out in the Employment Equity Act, which are Aboriginal or Indigenous people, persons with disabilities, visible minority, and women. So those 4 groups are the recognized groups that have protection within law. So federal regulated companies are mandated to report on the representation of those 4 groups within their organization. But to go a step further, a law was introduced in 2014 to have companies or mandate companies in general, not only federal regulated, to report on the representation of women on the board of directors as well as executives. And as you can see from the graph, between 2015 and 2019, because companies are mandated to report, the numbers seem to be improving, seem to be increasing. So it gives the credence to the fact that by reporting data, by tracking data, you could gain improvement in terms of the representation. Now, as COVID hit, I did some additional research on how COVID impacts based on race. Now, at the start of COVID, a lot of the health units would say that they don't need to report on race-based data because everybody's treated equally within the health system. But if you look at the data that I'm now showing of the deaths in the US, you can see that Black people represent disproportionately a lot more deaths in terms relative to their representation in the population. Similarly, when you look on the UK data, UK population, you can see that over here, there is a disproportionate representation in deaths which are displayed in percentage in orange versus the population in blue for the Black community of Caribbean descent, as well as you can see there's equal representation of the deaths for Black Africans. So it's interesting that Canada as a society are resisting race-based data when other countries that are collecting it are showing this disparity. So that's something that I would suggest that we keep in mind as we look at identifying and looking to eradicate systemic racism. So let's talk about our faith. So within our faith, our Catholic teaching has some social teachings. You also have the Catholic, let me see if I get this right, the Catholic Association of Religious and Family Life Educators of Ontario. So they've done a lot to come up with tools and literature that can help to deal with anti-Black racism and support equality within our education system and within our society. And then also we have our Pope, who has also spoken out really strongly against racism. So in terms of the first two, I want to mention them as resources that are, you're probably aware of, that are available, but I don't want to dwell on them too much, because what I would like to focus the rest of my presentation on is just talking about the mindset and the types of attitudes and behaviors that we need to think about using our Catholic faith in terms of supporting us to encourage equality and dismantle systemic racism where we find it. And I want to spend a little bit more time on listening to what our Pope has said about racism, xenophobia, and immigration. So I'm going to share another video. So I'll switch over here. And as they say, we're going to start from the top.
Degli Stati Uniti. Seguo con grande preoccupazione i dolorosi disordini sociali che stanno accadendo nella vostra nazione in questi giorni a seguito della tragica morte del signor George Floyd. Cari amici, non possiamo tollerare né chiudere gli occhi su qualsiasi tipo di razzismo o di esclusione e pretendere di difendere la sacralità di ogni vita umana. Nello stesso tempo dobbiamo riconoscere che la violenza delle ultime notti è autodistruttiva e autolesionista. Nulla si guadagna con la violenza e tanto si perde. Oggi mi unisco alla Chiesa di San Paul e Minneapolis e di tutti gli Stati Uniti nel pregare per il riposo dell'anima di George Floyd e di tutti gli altri che hanno perso la vita a causa del peccato del razzismo. Preghiamo per il conforto delle famiglie e degli amici affranti e preghiamo per la riconciliazione nazionale e la pace a cui aneliamo. Nostra Signora de Guadalupe, Madre dell'America, interceda per tutti coloro che lavorano per la pace e la giustizia nella vostra terra e nel mondo. Dio benedica tutti voi e le vostre famiglie.
And then I wanted to share one more. I could listen to this man for hours.
The Pope held a meeting with the national migration directors from the Council of European Bishops' Conferences. In a direct speech, he told them he's concerned about racism.
Non vi nascondo la mia preoccupazione di fronte ai segni di intolleranza, discriminazione e xenofobia che si riscontrano in diverse regioni d'Europa. Esse sono spesso motivate dalla diffidenza e dal timore verso l'altro, il diverso, lo straniero.
The Pope is concerned that many Catholics also have these racist attitudes toward immigrants.
Mi preoccupa ancor più la triste constatazione che le nostre comunità cattoliche in Europa non sono esenti da queste reazioni di difesa e rigetto, giustificate da un non meglio specificato dovere morale di conservare l'identità culturale e religiosa originaria.
Pope Francis said this state of mind is a mistake because the Christian message is for people of all cultures, and also the Catholic Church has spread on all continents thanks to the migration of missionaries. Pope Francis explained that the Christian attitude is to always protect the weak, and that the arrival of illegal immigrants does not negate their human rights, but means their situation requires attention.
So our Pope is lending his support to the conversation, encouraging us, by pointing out that racism is a virus that quickly mutates and instead of disappearing, goes into hiding and lurks in waiting. Instances of racism continue to shame us, for they show that our supposed social progress is not as real and definitive as we think. So I think it's important to realize that we sometimes we think it's over, but it just morphs and comes out in different ways that are harmful. So what should we do? So I wanted to share my thoughts on that. And I think one of the key things we need to do is understand our unconscious biases. And what I mean by that is understanding our affinity bias, where we tend to want to only associate with people from similar backgrounds and exclude people who have different backgrounds. Again, think of intersectionality. We need to change our perception bias, or recognize our perception bias, where we stereotype and make assumptions about people and individuals. We need to be careful of our confirmation bias, where we tend to hold on to previous belief based on our stereotypes, etc., as opposed to using new information to provide, to help us to change what we thought was the assumptions or the wrong assumptions that we made. We need to be careful of our intuition, our gut feel. We rely on our gut feel, which may not be as accurate, because we all have blind spots, and we need to be aware and conscious of those. And then finally, we need to be careful of groupthink. We need to ensure that we're evaluating things not based on what everybody in the group says, but through our own independent thought. And just as an example of groupthink, think of the shuttle that exploded. There are some scientists or technicians who knew that the O-ring was dangerous and had frozen, but the group felt that they could launch, and unfortunately, a number of astronauts lost their lives. So, let's be careful of our unconscious bias. Let's be aware of them and ensure that they're not blinding us to what is in front of us. And then we should be careful how we treat people. Understand the difference between equity and equality. Sometimes treating people equally is harmful as opposed to treating them equitably. We need to do our best to demonstrate empathy, true understanding, walking in people's shoes. Apply the 2 ears, 1 mouth principle. Listen twice as much as we speak. Learn more. Again, as I mentioned, we all have blind spots. We all have biases. Doesn't matter who we are. And we all need to learn. And speak up where possible. They say, in terms of terrorism, if you see something, say something. I think it applies to racism as well. And we need to think about being an anti-racist, not just saying, I'm not a racist, but really thinking about how do we act in terms of really dealing with racism, becoming an ally, right? Understanding people's struggles and making sure that we hold our friends and family accountable to be anti-racist. Reflect on our unconscious bias, understand where that is coming from, and really challenge our thoughts. Read and educate ourselves on the topics, because we don't know everything, and we're, like I said, we're always learning. Do what we can to break the system of oppression, right? Dedicating time to educate ourselves, supporting the communities that are different from ours. So anti-racist, as is described here, is a person who opposes racism and promotes racial tolerance. So let's do our best to do that. And then there's a concept that I came across that I don't know if you've heard of, being an upstander, where an upstander is a person who recognizes the injustice, knows their personal strengths, and uses their strength to create change. Sometimes we can't be the ones to do the change, but by recognizing it, we will know that we need to bring in help to combat the change that we need to see. And then in terms of upstander, we think of three things in terms to act against hate, bigotry, and bias. We intervene where we're comfortable. There are certain things that we'll be comfortable intervening on and taking action against. In those cases where we're not as comfortable, then we need to delegate to authority. So again, along the lines of see something, say something, maybe we do need professionals to come in to help and distract, diffuse the situation in the best way that we can. And then in terms of what we should do, we should learn from others. So again, just want to share a bit of a video here. So I like that video because it breaks it down a little simply to say, you know, inclusion begins with I. And while I'm here, I want to share another video that speaks to the power of one, a power of how one person can make a big change by doing very simple acts.
Who saw cops doing something she felt she just had to document. And that 17-year-old girl's footage of George Floyd's last moments not only resulted in charges against the officers, but it launched a worldwide movement. But being a minor and changing the world can be really stressful.
I think we are It's the video that's changing American history, and the young woman who shot it is finally coming forward. Her name is Darnella Frazier. She's a 17-year-old high school junior, and now she's being praised as a hero.
None of this would be happening were it not for the bravery and determination of that 17-year-old girl who was threatened with mace.
It is so sad. Darnella was in tears when she returned to the scene where Floyd lost his life.
They killed this man, and I was like 5 feet away.
She could not have predicted that the video she posted on Facebook that night would trigger huge protests around the world.
I call her the Rosa Parks of her generation because, like Rosa Parks, she wasn't looking to make a splash. She wasn't looking to change the world. She was looking to do the right thing.
Her lawyer, Seth Corbin, describes her as a regular teenager with a boyfriend and a job at the mall. A GoFundMe page on Darnella's behalf has raised more than $500,000 to support the healing and the restoration of hope for Darnella Frazier.
It is so traumatizing.
I can just imagine how traumatizing it is. 17 and having to deal with all of that, having to move out of the community that you grew up in, going to hiding because people are threatening your life just because you took a video of somebody doing the wrong thing. Now, in terms of learning, I mean, we do have a month devoted to Black history, or Black excellence, as I like to call it. But I think we need to do more than that. I mean, I do like the effort of making it 365, because having just 1 month devoted to people who are different, I don't think does justice to those people. Because as Black individuals, we're part of the community. Our history is definitely part of Canada, and we shouldn't be just celebrating excellence in 1 month. We should make it sure that it's recognized right throughout the year. So my prayer for the future, pretty much every time I go to Mass, I pray for my entire family and for all persons who suffer the ill effects of systemic and anti-Black racism and illnesses like cancer, colitis, and COVID in Canada and around the world. You know, I want to give a shout out to Monsignor Samuel Bianco of the Daily TV Mass. He's one of the few priests that I listen to who always mention racism in their homilies and the importance of dealing with racism as an issue. The Catholic bishops in the US have been combating racism, and they've created resources like Open Wide Our Hearts, which has spawned into resources available for students from K to 12. And in terms of my Catholic faith, they've given me an opportunity for hope with the recent announcement that Catholic orders, like with the Jesuit Conference of Canada and the US, are promising to raise sums to begin the process of truth and reconciliation. I think that's a big step, and a step that's very much needed. So again, just wanted to end up where I started, encouraging you to think of representation that matters, using our Catholic faith as a tuning fork, especially from a pro-life perspective, researching, encouraging everyone to research and educate yourself, identify allies, co-conspirators, mentors, and sponsors that will help change the systemic racism. Seek organization that inspires and supports you. Act based on your circle of influence. Jesus said, one doesn't hide a lamp under a bushel. And when I think of it, I think of the song, Children of the Light, that we encourage our children to sing, to let them know that they're light onto the world. And of course, it's important to gain mental health support, especially in this time of COVID. And of course, to maintain your health in general. And one thing I want to leave you with is just the question that I've come to look at and reflect on quite a bit is, asking the question in as many situations as relevant, what would Jesus do? So that's it for my presentation. I now open to questions.
So I think we can move to questions two ways. We can do hand raising, and if I can ask people on my team to watch, because I don't see everybody that's on the screen. Or we can type it in the comment sections, or I guess turn on our mics. But I think it might be less, it'd be better if we followed the other two to raise our hands if we have a question, or put it in the comments.
We have a comment currently in the chat. This was a powerful presentation, and thank you.
Wow, appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Also inspiring. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Sorry.
I think I see Nalini raise her hand.
Good evening, Jeffrey.
Hey, Nalini.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to apologize for, actually, I regret not being there at the beginning of your presentation, but it's been an extremely long day for me. I am not well, and so I was trying to balance my day.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
I
hope
just
you
want
feel
to,
better soon.
Thank you. But I just want to say to Jeffrey, thank you so much for being part of our community and for helping us for all that we're doing at your Catholic District School Board. For those of you that don't know, Dr. Thompson is part of our anti-Black racism pillar and has been an integral part of us understanding anti-Black racism. So I'm extremely grateful that he has actually engaged with our community in this regard, and I look forward to his ongoing collaboration. I hope this is recorded so that those of us that have missed the first part of it can actually hear it again. So thank you so much, Jeffrey, and thank you to the religious team for putting this together.
Thank you, Nalini.
Thanks, Nalini, and it is being recorded, yeah.
And I see Alexandra has her hand up, so go ahead, Alexandra.
Yes, hello, good evening. Thank you for that presentation. As an English teacher, I know there's so much power in narratives and storytelling. And I find that sometimes when building up that sense of empathy, having those personal narratives kind of communicated from the students themselves, it's really, really powerful. And it kind of opens a lot of kids' eyes, right? They really understand it when they hear it through their peers. So I was just wondering if we could like brainstorm maybe together, like how we can get students to be more vocal about, you know, positive and not so positive experiences that they're going through. And maybe how we can use those stories to not only educate people, but to just get them more empathetic, to help them realize how prevalent it is, even within our York Region community, which I think sometimes we feel is a little more protected or more like we're not like that, we sometimes say, but really it's subtle discrimination in a lot of ways. So maybe brainstorm as a group, or you could share some ideas as to how we can get the students' voices communally as a school board kind of being communicated, and how we can share it with other students in the board.
Yeah, and I think, you know, some students are shy, especially in large groups. So, you know, just a thought is, you know, do you want maybe have it done where they're doing it in small groups of, you know, of their peers, because they, you know, whereas some students might not want to be in the front of the class and put on the spot where, you know, they have a lot of eyes on them, they may want to do it in subtle ways, like in terms of, you know, writing it out and, you know, or talking in small groups. I don't know if you've tried that before, but that's something that comes to mind.
Yes, thank you. I completely agree with that. You don't want to put them on the spot or force them to share things they're not ready to share.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if anyone else in the group here has, you know, done other things within their school, or, you know, within their departments, even if you're a high school teacher within your department or your division, what you found has kind of worked to get students to start communicating about what they've witnessed or what they've gone through and how it made them feel, and sharing that with their peers.
Alexandra, there is a book called What If? And each chapter leads you in the process of writing a story. So when I taught English, that was the summative task for each student in the course, that we would go through that chapter, and for example, it begins with writing an introductory sentence to a story, and it develops the story and characters through each summative task, and eventually the students have told a story, something they've experienced or something they know about, or they've witnessed. So just to offer that, the book is called What If?
And I do recall that, Shannon, you used a set of cards. I believe it was something to do with the danger of a single story. And the cards were great sort of discussion sparkers. It was used with adults when I saw them, but I think you could select through them and come up with a group of cards that would be appropriate for high school kids. Shannon, can you give more
So it was
information
an
on that?
initiative through Creative Minds, so culturally appropriate questions, and they were community building starting questions. So through the Indigenous lens, we would stand in a circle, and because traditionally stories and people would share in circles. So we would stand in a circle, and it would be as simple as, you know, what is a memory that, or what is one of your favorite smells when you were a child? And then somebody would talk about maybe something that was homemade or being baked in their kitchen, or something that they remembered. And so they were great kind of community starter cards. They were put together to kind of break down barriers and have people share experiences.
Nalini's hand is up again.
So Jeffrey's prompted me in the sense that yesterday and today we've engaged in discussions on what's culturally relevant and responsive. And the reality is that when we try to get people engaged, the first thing is to create a sense of belonging. And the question becomes, how do we do that? We have to understand our students. We have to know who they are and where they come from, and how the way we perceive them impacts the way in which they react. So it's not a one size fits all. It is not a quick fix. It calls for us to reflect on exactly who our students are, and it takes time to engage our students in a way that we identify. It's not to say that you see a black face and that all black faces need to be treated the same. It's not to say that you see a brown face and all brown faces are to be feeling the same. The reality is we have to identify a student by the way in which they choose to identify themselves, whether they choose in terms of gender orientation or gender expression, or by way of ethnic diversity or religious diversity. These are the things that make up our students. So Alexandra, to your point, it's an important question, but the reality is, as a board, we have a lot of work to do in terms of unpeeling the onion. I know it's become a cliche, it's very rhetoric, people use that all the time, but the reality is we have to go one step at a time. The important thing is that we're thinking that way, and we're actually widening our horizons in terms of how to approach our students. I ask you to reach out to the religious department, who have done an incredible amount of work in terms of equity, but also to reach out to the pillars that we have at the board. We have 9 pillars who are part of the HEDIAC committee, one of which is anti-Black racism, and they've done a significant amount of work. And then we have the Human Rights and Equity Office. Collaboratively, we help you to address the needs of our students. So I ask that you seek this information collaboratively and that we work together to address the needs of our board. Thank you.
Thanks, Nalini. We have a couple of comments in the stream. I'm not sure if either Robert or Michelle or Elizabeth wanted to speak to those.
I was just saying how it's important to develop and nurture those relationships, I think, from the beginning of the year, and students will know when it's if it's just for a one-off activity or task, they won't feel that sense of belonging that Nalini mentioned. But if we provide the conditions and space for them to where their voice is honored from the beginning in other contexts, then they may be more likely to share their narrative and what they've experienced.
Mm-hmm. And Joel, you had your hand up. Is your hand still up?
Yes, Kelly, and thank you. Jeffrey, thank you so much for a very insightful presentation. My question has to do with the success of what we are doing in the work that you're doing. How do we measure if we are making any change or if we're making any progress? Because there are many times when I feel like I'm dancing around the circle and we're not making any progress. How do we know we've made progress in our classes, in our schools? Where can we, is there any way we can know?
I think that's a hard question sometimes to answer, because I think it depends on how students feel. Because I know for me, when my daughter was, as I mentioned, was going to school, she did not feel as invited to participate in certain things. I mean, she was a good athlete. She was really good in terms of her schoolwork, but she didn't feel as included. So how do you measure that inclusion piece? And I like the idea of the stories. Maybe it's getting them to trust and to share more, that can come out. I'm not too sure how, the counselors within the school are, what resources they have to help the students to share how they feel, so that you can be guided by the experience of the diverse groups of kids and how they are feeling within the environment. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks. Michael, I had seen your hand up. Are you still?
No, I'm good. I was going to ask about the measurables, but same as Joel. So
yeah.
I think also other people had their hand up also. Vince, I think.
Thank you, Michael. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your presentation tonight. One of the things that really resonated with me was when you mentioned that your daughter experienced bullying, and she was a student in one of our schools. I as a white male administrator, wanting very much to move from ally to partner, I guess my question would be, what would you want to hear from your school administrator or from your school's staff, let's say, to help with or to show or to demonstrate that they truly were ready to sort of walk that journey with you?
I think it's wanting to. Well, one of the things I think is in terms of the curriculum, because one of the things that I know is, depending on how prepared the school is to do Black history, it either is done very well, or lip service seems to be played to it. And I would like to see that Black excellence is not just like a 1 month thing. It's more of an inclusive history, inclusive almost tapestry of the education system. Because I think if students are able to read about themselves and see themselves represented in a lot more of the literature, in terms of what's being taught in school and in terms of the history being shared, I think that would help to move the needle a bit more.
Joseph, you had a question?
Hi, Joseph. It's Mrs. Antunes. I noticed that you asked a question. We're really happy that you're here, and I think it's your time to ask the question now.
I could go at the end of you, Miss Antunes. I don't mind if I do.
That's okay, Joseph. It's your turn right now. We're going in order. So go ahead. We're happy that you
Okay,
joined us
then
this
can I go
evening.
at the end of the last bit? Like what I do at school council?
Sure. Do you want to wait till the end?
I would like to tell a little bit about my why I'm here at the school committee.
That's
Then
fantastic. Go ahead, Joseph. Go ahead.
So you know why I'm here at school community? So I understand. My question is, I cannot stand everybody is getting bullied. So to all of you who work at the York Catholic School Board. So for a 20-year-old, I see everyone gets bullied at Carter day after day on their message, email, Instagram, and everywhere. So my question is, how to stop bullying at Carter? How to stop? That's my question here for tonight.
Thank you, Joseph. That's a really good question, and it ties into everything we're talking about. Thanks for bringing the question forward.
You're welcome. I have something big at the end.
That's a very important
Thank you, Joseph.
question, Joseph.
You're welcome. I will be here until 8 o'clock.
Thank you for being here, Joseph. And that's a tough question to crack because I know when my daughter was bullied, I mean, we brought it to the attention of the teacher. And I know the teacher had a conversation with the entire class. And, when I checked back with my daughter, she felt that it was adequately addressed because, the teacher listened and acted upon it. And I think the fact that the teacher took the time, immediately acted on it, and acknowledged that something was wrong. I never heard her come back home and say that she was bullied again. So it seemed as if that immediate action, that immediate addressing of the issue is probably one of the things that needs to happen to stop it as soon as it starts.
And Joseph, if I can offer one experience I had, one of my children was a person who bullied a lot, and and he was bullying one person in particular.
Wow, yeah.
And so what we did, and I would only say we only do this if it's safe to do so. We arranged to meet to go.
I see the feeling that you have like me, and
we went to the family, and we sat and we had dinner together, and we brought him, and he was then having dinner with the family with the child that he was bullying, and then they got to play together while we were continuing to talk as parents. And one of the ways that we broke it down, they eventually became good friends. But the ways we broke it down was to not just see it as a school problem only, but something we're all responsible for. That helps.
Okay, so later I have to share you with a story.
So Kelly, if I can please respond to Joseph. Hi, Joseph. My name is Nalini.
Hi, Nalini.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you for joining us this evening.
No problem. I'm glad to. So at the end, I have a story to share.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm very glad you joined us, and I so appreciate your conversation.
At 8 o'clock, I'm coming back. I'm going to turn on my mic and tell you the whole story about bullying, how bullying hurts at Cardinal Carter, okay?
So, Joseph, what I want to say to you is this. We need to hear your story. I'm more than welcome to hear your story. We can arrange a meeting with your principal, Ms. Atunas, and we can hear your story and see what's exactly happening. One of my point being that we have to address every student's concerns individually, and sometimes that may call for confidentiality. So I ask that you raise this with your principal and that you call us in so that we can help you to figure out what is happening. I want to acknowledge that we accept that there is bullying happening. But if we don't hear your story, we won't know what is happening. So Joseph, please reach out to your principal, or you can reach directly out to me, and I will be more than happy to hear you.
All right. You're welcome.
We have a few lovely people who have put their comments into the chat, and I think that they are definitely worth us all having a look at, because a lot of people are saying the same thing about it's about story, it's about hearing, it's about building relationships and safe spaces.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about microaggressions and the buildup of microaggression in any student, but in this case, a Black student experience. Is that something you feel comfortable speaking to?
Yeah, it's something I feel comfortable speaking to, because, you know, I also face it in the workplace, right? You can see how, you know, people treat you differently than others, and they make, you know, just the way they speak to you, or not speak to you, or not allow you to share. It's sometimes hard to deal with, and it's almost, you have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis, because some people may not even realize that they are doing the microaggression, whereas some people consciously are doing the microaggression. So that's what makes it a little hard. I mean, it's like our Pope said, you know, it's something that lurks, and sometimes it springs out consciously or unconsciously. And I find that as a Black individual, you end up second guessing yourself as, was that something that meant to be snarky or not? So sometimes it's really hard to put your finger on it, is whether or not that's something that was really intended or not intended. Does that answer your question, Michael?
Yes, thank you. And one of the things I would point out, even my son describes this experience where the microaggressions, as you say, may be unintended. Your guest trying to guess what it is, but it's happened quite frequently. So in one day in school, he would say, there's been 100 times where I've been experiencing these, what we call microaggressions. So that builds up in a day-to-day experience.
Yeah, it does. It does. And one of the things I wanted to ask, you know, all of you as educators, I mean, I know that, you know, as I see some reports that have come out, like, you know, recently the Peel District School Board reporting in terms of, you know, some Black students saying that they're punished a little harder, a little harsher than, you know, people that are, you know, not looking like them. Do we keep records of, you know, the race within our school system to understand if some of these things are happening disproportionately, to help us appreciate the equity of how things are handled?
So if I may, Jeffrey,
Sure.
from a human rights perspective, we have urged all principals and superintendents to share with us the incidents of racism that are happening in their schools. While we have encouraged this for almost a year now, since I've joined the board, and perhaps it was happening before then, unfortunately, not all incidents are being reported. So for those that we have, we can actually, talk to them and reflect on them and work on them. But for those that I haven't, unfortunately not. We have a formal complaints process. We've asked everyone to respond and make sure that they report. I just want to make a comment about microaggressions. I know, even myself, personally, I reflect on them as microaggressions, but I think we need to reflect on them from a cultural perspective, because very often the word microaggression is to reflect on it from a very white perspective. And the reality is that very often microaggressions are macroaggressions. The reality is that very often the things that we are exposed to from a discrimination perspective, from a racist perspective, are things that are not really micro in nature. They're macro in nature, but because we began to use these words to reflect a kind of Eurocentric approach, as the racialized communities within systems, we accept it as being microaggressions. And so my comment being this, that, you know, if you feel that you are in some way discriminated against or in some way harassed, and that it's going against the grain of you being acknowledged by way of your identity, and whatever that identity means, besides reflecting on it, you need to report it. Because unless these things are reported, there's no way of us understanding to what extent this has impacted our system and to what extent we need to address it.
Thank you, Nalini.
Further to your question, Jeffrey, we do keep suspension data at York Catholic, but I'm not sure exactly how it's analyzed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's not analyzed, Kelly, by way of race. It's something that I found out lately, right? And so we're trying to sort of dive into it and figure out, Jeffrey. To your point, absolutely acknowledged. It's something we have to dive further into.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Alexandra has a question. Alex?
Hi, I'm sorry. I guess it's a bit of a comment rather than a question. I really liked your point, Nalini, about this idea of reporting. But if you look historically, let's say about sexual assault, most are unreported. And I think the real question is why, though? Why aren't things being reported? Why don't students feel like, you know, it's important for them to report these experiences, however big or small they might be, or report seeing or witnessing or being a bystander to these experiences? And I think that what we've learned from the sexual assault data of the 1980s and onwards is that this idea that we have to have this culture of it's not okay. And then other people will start to speak up and start to report these things. And although those really big experiences are very traumatic, the ones that do lead to, you know, official reports that get sent up to superintendents, it's the smaller things I find that are going, let's say, unreported, or they're not being shared, right? It doesn't have to be a formal report, but just a safe place to kind of share, this is what this experience was like. And it doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be, I'm telling you this because I want to report this student who did it. It could just be, this is an experience that I had. This is what it looked like. This is what it felt like. And I think that that would help make other people kind of more aware and be able to recognize those experiences when they witness them happening to their friends or to themselves. And I think that that is really the shift that we need right now. We kind of need to have this culture of it's not okay. This is what it looks like. Like there's an education factor I find. And again, I stress the idea of those personal narratives. It's the best way for us to learn what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like. And I still kind of want to think of different ways that that can happen in a school. Is it student forums? Is it, you know, having an online space? Is it having smaller kind of discussions through a high school's ACC club? So, you know, clubs where students like that can come together and talk about these things. I always think of how we can make this more practical. I see a lot of people talking about in the chat box, how can we turn it into action? How will students see that we're actually responding to these stories? And I feel like that's the biggest hurdle of all of this, right? A place where we can take it to, now what are we going to do about it? Now that we're getting people sharing and talking about it and understanding it, how are we going to do it?
So Alexandra, I think your question is absolutely important. I mean, it's beyond important for me. If you're not comfortable in your school, if you're not comfortable reporting to anyone in your school, you need to come to the Office of Human Rights and Equity. Our website, on the board website, we have the Human Rights and Equity webpage. It gives you a clear demarcation of how to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to put my email and my cell phone on the side chat so that you reach out to me. The reality is, it's not just about safe places. As I've stated in the chat, it's about creating a brave space. And I will give you that I promise you. When you come to the Office of Human Rights, whatever you share is absolutely confidential. And we will undertake that investigation in that way. In this day and age, beyond there being no place for racism, beyond there being no place for discrimination, there is absolutely no place for sexual harassment and violence in our school, regardless how minimal people assume that to be. So I give you my guarantee. If you reach out to me, I will absolutely follow through and address those concerns. So you can always get my number from Michael and from Kelly and everyone, but it's very easy to find us. It's either the Office of Human Rights and Equity or it's Nalini Jagnandan.
Thanks.
Alexandra. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I was just about to close things off.
Yeah. So Alexandra, and just to answer your question, I think it may not be a magic bullet. I see Ellie has put in equity clubs, BIPOC clubs. I think it's going to be many different things, because if we think back to intersectionality, different people will find comfort in different ways. So I think we need to think about how do we offer as many avenues as possible for people to express themselves or to connect, to help them to find what they consider to be a safe space. Because what some people find to be safe, others don't. So it's almost going to be trying different things and seeing what works depending on the type of individual that the students are.
So Jeffrey, if I can please add to your comment.
Sure.
In terms of the chat that's been stated, I just want everyone to understand that the Office of Human Rights is at arm's length from the board. We don't, in as much as we're connected with the board, we have no obligation to the board in terms of being impartial. We're totally impartial. We actually address your concerns based on the evidence that's presented to us. So if people feel that, this is not a safe space, I want to assure you that nothing you share with the Office of Human Rights will in any way be shared with your school or your principal or the SO or the board unless you choose to do so. So I want to be very clear of that, because I think to someone's point, the fear of reprisal is absolutely obvious, and it's a reality. If you come to the Human Rights Office, then that is your recourse in terms of nobody having the ability to have any form of reprisal against you. That will be your safeguard. So I want to urge you, the problem is we don't know these things are happening in schools. All we can respond to is what we know. And so I urge you to bring it forward and assure you that it is a safe place and that it will be kept confidential and there will be no form of reprisal.
Thank you, Nalini. So at this point, I always quote Sister Lillian, who taught me, and she would talk about in conversations there's such a thing as tidal time, and there's also such a thing as tidy time. So we've entered into coming close to tidy time because it's approaching 8 o'clock. So I wanted to take a moment to thank Jeffrey, Dr. Thompson, for being with us and reminding us that our faith is our tuning fork to look at issues around anti-Black racism, and that I thought it was wonderful to see that quotation very strong from the Pope about the sin of racism. That it carries with it that strength, that it is a sinful action and sinful attitude among us, and that one of the ways to undo it is to look at this experience and story of a person, to bring it to the human level, but also to look at the power of a person. So many of us feel disempowered in the work that, whether it's to speak up or whether it's to be an upstander, etc. And some of that can be fed, I believe, by what you were saying about learning, that we see ourselves constantly as learning, and that we connect it to our lived experience today. You mentioned the migrant workers, which are often here in York Region, and connected to the fact that a lot of this segregation experiences people have are living memory. That the history of it's not so much a history of slavery as a legacy of slavery that actually is continuing into our time. It's not a past event. It's an ongoing it's expressed in different ways, but it's expressed in a culture systemically, individually, etc. So I thank you for speaking with us and for being so willing when I asked to jump right in and do that with us. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much. And I'm going to ask everybody to turn on their cameras and give some applause.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Can I say one more thing?
Go ahead, Joseph.
Okay. You know what? I saved it for all of you have to listen. There is no right to treat people at Cardinal Car. There is no right to treat everybody. Because you know what? I have to say something. Like I said before, it's no regards about bullying. Everyone should treat people with respect at our school, at Carter. So all we have to do to have to treat with respect with one of each other. So how to say this? Perfect. So that's easy. You have to treat people with respect. With everyone needs to be with respect. Everyone should be touched. And no one should be not happy at Colonel Carter. The way how I'm here through it. So I know this pandemic is bringing us everyone down. Remember, everyone, we're all in this together. And I'm just have to say, how to treat people with respect, you ask? How to treat people with respect. First thing, number one on my list, there is no right to bully anybody outside of school, inside of school. And you know what? I'm glad I'm here in this meeting to join myself. And thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you very much, and for your wise words.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are you going to tell everyone how good I was tonight?
I am. I'm going to tell Joseph, everybody here, I'm going to let them know what an amazing Cardinal Carter student that you are. You're part of our student council. You're part of our equity club.
I'm part of all the council.
We should give Joseph a round of applause too.
Yes, let's hear it for Joseph.
And Joseph, people were more concerned about what I would say. So I want Ms. Antunes to tell everybody that I was good tonight too.
Yeah. And I'm so happy that your teacher advisor, Joseph, you saw Mr. Shenna. I'm so happy that your teacher advisor for the Equity Club shared the link with you tonight. So thank you for joining us. And I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early.
You represented school very well, Joseph.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, a religious team. You did an amazing job to get Jeffrey on. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nalini.
Michael, you can stop recording now.